Welcome to UFC 308 MMA on Deck Breakdown. We've got 13 fights going on this weekend at the Etihad Arena in Abu Dhabi. And boy, is it a doozy. We've got some bangers on deck. The prelims begin at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Make note of that. We've all had the situation where we think an event is starting at one time. We miss those fights. You know, it's happening in London, or it's happening, in this case, in Abu Dhabi, and we get the start time wrong. Make note of that, 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Prelims begin, and the main card starts at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. All right, guys, so it's going to be an early Saturday that's going to start the day right off the bat with a whole lot of fun. One of the best cards of the year, even without Gane and Volkov, who were moved to a different event. It is still a fantastic and fire event. We know that the Saudis like to make it big, so that's what they're doing with UFC 308 here. And we're going to break down a few of these fights here, more of the standout fights. We're not going to go through every single one. If you want that to happen on the next video, let me know down low in the comments. Please hit the like button if you enjoy this video. It helps the new channel grow. Really appreciate that support. All right, the first prelim that we're going to tackle here, and the only prelim that we're going to discuss on this video, is going to be Geoff Neal versus Rafael dos Anjos. All right, this is in the welterweight division, and both fighters have won 2 of their last 5 fights. So they haven't been on a great run recently, and I think that's been more of a letdown for Geoff Neal. Obviously, we know Rafael dos Anjos is the vet. He's 39 years old, and he's coming to the end of his career. In fact, he was a fighter that fought on the first Abu Dhabi card, so he's experienced in this environment, and that may lend him a bit of an advantage. Geoff Neal, on the other hand, is 34. Now, he's not too far up there just yet, but he has not looked like himself in the past couple of fights. Now, that should also be followed up with he was fighting Ian Garry and Shavkat, 2 high-level competitors in the welterweight division, and I think Shavkat has a high probability of winning the title in the next fight against Belal. But for now, let's focus on Geoff Neal and his matchup against Rafael dos Anjos. Dos Anjos, obviously, grappling advantage and experience, as we talked about. We should also point out that he has a high fight IQ, and that's something that seemingly has been letting down Geoff Neal recently. His IQ has not been where it needs to be. And, you know, he's gotten himself into some trouble when he's got the skills, he's got the capability, but he doesn't always seem to have the great game plan that he needs. Now, with all that said, Neal is still a heavy favorite going into this fight. He's minus 290 on the money line. That's a huge favorite. And that doesn't really give me a lot of confidence in the bets that are available for this fight. I mean, if you really like dos Anjos, obviously that's a great dog to pick. However, the 39 years old, going against a striker here, that's probably going to be faster, stronger. That's difficult to go in dos Anjos' favor as well. We're going to go with Geoff Neal as the pick to win this one, and it's going to be by a decision. Now, Neal hasn't been knocking people out as of late, and dos Anjos has a generally solid chin. Age could factor into that, but we've got to go with what we know, and that's that dos Anjos, experienced, is going to make it difficult on Neal and has had a great chin, and we know that Neal has not stepped up to the plate as late. And we know that Neal's got to show up, right? We've got to see him show up before we get confident in him. And with that said, I'm not confident in any of the bets because we don't know which version of Neal we're going to get. But we're going to go with Geoff Neal for the win. By decision, if you want to make that bet, is probably the best one to roll with. Let's move on to the main event. We got Sara Magomedov versus Armen Petrosyan. This one is in the middleweight division. We got Magomedov that is undefeated at 14-0, while Armen lost his last fight against Vieira by submission. This one should be a banger, guys. It's going to be on the feet. There's not going to be any groundwork, I feel like. This one's going to be stand up all the way through. We got Armen likes to use the leg kicks, and we've got a dynamic striker in Magomedov. With that said, I think it's going to be hard to pick against Magomed. He's undefeated, dynamic striker, lots of momentum, and he's looked great. You can't really say he's looked weak against any of his opponents, but he's going to have to utilize pressure in this one. He's going to have to stay on top of Arman. He cannot let him stay at a distance and use his range. So I feel like if he pressures, he should be fine. And that leads us to the pick. Magomed is the favorite at -160. And I think that straight money line has enough value there that we can roll with that. So I'm going to go Magomed money line pick at -160. Next up on the main event, we have Lerone Murphy and Dan Ige. This one is in the featherweight division. Both fighters are the same age at 33. Murphy has never lost, and he's on a 6-fight win streak, with his last win coming against Edson Barboza, while Dan Ige, we know, stepped up on short notice to fight Diego Lopez at UFC 303. Big props to Dan Ige on that one, stepping up on hours' notice to make sure that that event did not go down the drain. And he actually put on a great showing in that fight. It was very impressive. Diego Lopez, he had a little bit of trouble. It should be said that he had to go through multiple weight cuts himself, and Diego looked great in his last fight. So how much stock do we put in that fight is the question. We got Dan Ige stepping up on short notice. Diego is unprepared. And the thing about Dan is he's always got that KO power, right? He's going to be in the fight. He's sound defensively, and he's got KO power. So this means it's going to be a tough matchup for an undefeated Murphy. I think the reason Dan is getting this fight is not so much of his resume or his record. It is because he stepped up on a late notice fight, and the UFC and Dana White said, okay, this is your thank you. This is your opportunity. We'll see if Dan Ige can make the most of this. He is an explosive fighter, and it will be a tough test for Murphy, but I think he should win based on the sharp striking ability that he has and the skill level difference. And the biggest component here, as we always should remember with fights, is who can fight not to lose, meaning that they can get by on the fight without doing something crazy. And that's Murphy. Murphy can fight not to lose in this one. I don't like seeing that in fights. It's annoying. It makes for boring fights. But Murphy can go out there and be cautious and fight a smart fight. Dan Ige can't really do that. I don't see a win coming by way of points for Dan. I think he's got to knock him out. So that means Murphy can fight not to lose. And when you have that option, you don't have to be chaotic. You can be structured. That's going to play to Murphy's skill set, and he should come away with a decision. That's the bet. Murphy wins by decision at -155. Let's move on to the big three. We got the big three of the remainder of the card. We got Magomed Ankalaev versus Aleksandar Rakić. This is in the light heavyweight division. They're both 32 years old. Rakić has a 3-inch reach advantage. Rakić is 2-5 in his last 5 after suffering the KO to Yuri in his last fight, which was a banger. Rakić looked great in that fight. There were moments, I think, that we all thought that Yuri could have been slept. But that is not so much indicative of Rakić, and it's more indicative of the porous defensive ability of Yuri. Loved Yuri, fantastic fighter to watch, always entertained by him, but his defense is terrible. And that's going to make Rakić look good. And, he was thrown into a brawl, and that's why it was an exciting fight. We got to see Rakić, what he's capable of. Now, are we going to see that in this fight? That's what we'll have to find out. We've got on May 14th, the fight before Rakić fought Yuri was against Jan Blachowicz, and that's where he blew out his right ACL, May 14th, 2022. So not a lot of fighting for Rakić over the past few years, and he hasn't knocked out anyone since 2019. That's a long time for somebody with the size and power of Rakić not to knock anybody out. It's going to be difficult to do that against Magomed. It's one of those things where you get the confidence, where you feel like you can knock everybody out once you start knocking them out. Is he going to have that confidence coming into that fight against Ankalaev? It seems unlikely. Now, Ankalaev is unbeaten in his last 12 fights. His wins are KOs or unanimous decisions, and that means he's dominating the people that he's facing. That comes from his structured, sound striking and defense. He puts that together. And when you have great striking with great defense, you're very difficult to beat. It's hard to see Ankalaev losing this fight. He's got advantages everywhere, and he's a better overall fighter. However, it is a tough matchup, and it will be a good test. Ultimately, though, Magomed should win, and he's going to be the pick here. Rakić doesn't have the luxury of playing it safe, and he's going to come out guns blazing. I think he knows that this is going to be a big fight for him. He's not going to get many more of these opportunities, and this was handed to him on a silver platter. He had just lost to Yuri. Normally, you're not going to get a number one contender matchup. It might play out that if he does win, he's got to beat somebody else before he's going to face Pereira. But as of now, we can assume the winner of this fight is going to go for the title because there's not many fighters that are going to be on the pedestal to fight Alex Pereira. So he's got a great opportunity here. He's likely to come out guns blazing, look for a spectacular finish. And if he does that, if he puts pressure on Magomed, he may be able to knock him out. I think it's unlikely, but that is the way I could see him garnering the win. Now, with all that said, I think guns blazing works to Magomed's advantage because he can counter Rakić for the KO. So it's one of those situations where Rakic's way to win is going to play into Magomed's strength, and that means the likely outcome is going to be Ankalaev by TKO or knockout. This is at plus 225, so this is a pretty solid bet here. If you think Ankalaev is going to sleep Rakić, that's what I would roll with. We go to our second last fight and the co-main event, Robert Whittaker versus Khamzat Chimaev. This is in the middleweight division. We've got Whittaker at 33 years old and Chimaev is at 30. We could say Chimaev is entering into his prime here. Chimaev is undefeated at 13-0, while Robert Whittaker is 3-5 in his last 5, although those 2 losses came to Rakić and Israel Adesanya. Obviously, top-tier competition and former champions, one's current champion, the 2 losses are coming to, meaning that the caliber of losses is something where you can say, okay, he's lost to the best of the best. Listen, let's not overlook Bobby here. Whittaker beat Aleksandar in his last fight, looked great. Uppercut, knocked him out, slept him. You could see the passion. Bobby wanted that knockout and he got it. So his confidence is going to be going high into this one. Prior to that, he won a decision against Paulo Costa. Chimaev has only fought once in the last 22 months. He beat Usman via majority decision, but that's a long bout with not a lot of fights. We know that Chimaev has struggled with some health issues, and that set him back. We know he's had visa issues, so he's been a bit of an enigma. However, we need to point out that he is only 30 years old, and he's already shown what he's capable of doing, put together a pretty nice resume. I mean, both resumes are good here. Whittaker has fought the best of the best, and Chimaev has beat everybody that's been put in front of him. And when you have people like Gilbert Burns in front of you, that's not an easy matchup. Kamaru Usman, not an easy matchup. We want to, look at that fight and say, okay, it was on short notice for Usman, but Usman is one of the best wrestlers in the UFC. His pedigree for wrestling is unmatched, you could say. And we had Chimaev come in and dominate him on the ground. Did we get to finish? No, but we also saw that Usman seemed to go in there and think, okay, I'm just going to play defensive. He didn't try to move offensively, and that ended up costing him the fight. So, you can't just let Chimaev come in there and dominate you, or you're going to likely lose in a 3-round fight, that's for sure. Now, this one is a 5-round fight. We'll see if that's going to play a role in the later rounds. There's a lot of chatter out there that Chimaev doesn't have the gas tank to continue on. You could argue we saw that in the Kamaru Usman fight, that he started to deteriorate in round 3 and was not getting the best of the stand-up. But I don't think we saw enough of a drop-off to completely write off Chimaev's capabilities here. I mean, it wasn't an easy matchup for Chimaev in this one. He was preparing for a different fight leading up to that one. I think we may be underestimating Chimaev coming into this fight. Now, he's the favorite. He's an overwhelming favorite, and you could not go wrong, really, betting on Bobby here. Being the underdog, knowing his pedigree, knowing, the streak that he's been on. It's not a bad bet, but you have to actually think that he's going to win. And that's where we come to the odds here. Chimaev inside the distance is minus 175, and Chimaev by submission is plus 225. So that's something to keep in mind. Before we get to the pick, I think we should also consider the way Chimaev looks this time around. We mentioned he's had a long layoff, and I think that may have been just what he needed. He looks much more calm. He looks much more relaxed. He looks much more organized. He looks much more mature at his camp thus far. And he seems like he's going to be improved based on the fact he's brought in some high-level coaches. It seems like he's starting to take his craft seriously. And if we've seen Chimaev not taking his craft seriously, just a wild cannon and dominating up to this point, if he realizes his window is closing and he's going to pursue dominance in the UFC, that's his priority, then we could see a scary Chimaev, an unbeatable Chimaev, in my opinion, because this guy's wrestling is insane. And wrestling beats strikers most of the time. And that's what we have in this matchup, the wrestler versus the boxer. Of course, we know that Bobby has wrestling in his background, but that's not his forte, and we know that he's not going to win that matchup against Chimaev. It comes down to Whittaker's boxing versus Chimaev's wrestling and stamina. Whittaker's going to try to weather the storm, as everybody tries to do with Chimaev. The thing here is, I don't think Whittaker does very well under pressure. We saw Usman calm and collected. I don't think Whittaker is going to be able to do the same as Usman did. He doesn't tend to do as well, and we saw that with DDP. The pressure was a problem for him. I think people are sleeping on Chimaev here after his type train got derailed. Now that he's motivated, it's a bad combo for Bobby. I think Whittaker gets overwhelmed and submitted in the first round. So I'm going Chimaev by submission at plus 225. Last but not least, we have the banger, Ilia versus Holloway. Will this be the fight of the year? I don't think it's going to be. I think that we are reading too much into this one, and I think there are levels here. I think that we're feeding into the hype from Holloway. What an outstanding and amazing fight we saw between Justin Gaethje and Max Holloway at UFC 300. I jumped up off my couch, screamed at the end of that fight. My girlfriend jumped up off the couch and screamed at the end of that fight. It was insane. Max got whatever he wanted after that. People were doubting him. And that's what I'm going to say about this prediction here, is that the same way I'm feeling going into this fight was honestly the same way I'm feeling going into the fight against Ilia, is that Max doesn't have a chance here against Justin. Justin is just too much of a machine. He's too powerful. He's on a roll. Justin is headed towards the title, and I'm not saying he was going to win the title, but I think he was headed towards a title shot, and that's the way I was feeling going into that one. I was wrong. Max came out. He looked fantastic. He looked sensational. But a big part of that, I think, was him at lightweight. I think he is a better fighter at lightweight, and I think he should have stayed there. I think Ilia is in his head. I think he feels like he has to beat Ilia. He's taking this fight not because it's the best thing to do for his career. He's taking it because he wants to beat Ilia. And that's going to play into Topuria's hands, figuratively and literally. You're going to have a Holloway that's coming for him, stepping into the danger zone potentially, where we have Ilia that is calm, collected, confident, coming off beating one of the greats, the best of all time in Volkanovski. We look at the past here. Max got dominated by Volk in their last fight. And watching Volk versus Ilia, everyone felt it was just a matter of time before Topuria connected and it was over. Volk fought well against Ilia and still lost. Today, Volk likely still beats Max. So we don't do MMA math, but I think in this instance, we need to look at, okay, Volk versus Max, who's the better fighter? To me, that's Volkanovski. And Volkanovski looked average against Topuria. Topuria looked superhuman. Anyways, let's go over some of the details. We've got Ilia undefeated, 15-0. Max has won 4 of his last 5, with the loss coming against Volkanovski. Max's big KO in the last fight means he has a ton of momentum, but obviously that's matched by Ilia's momentum. Max's strengths are his chin, his endurance, his boxing, and his footwork. Ilia's pretty much good everywhere and showcased power and footwork against Volk. The footwork on that knockout was literally insane. If you haven't seen it, go and watch the footwork. Really, really textbook stuff. As I said, I think Max is making a mistake here, dropping down to featherweight. He should have stayed at lightweight. He looks strong and fast, and he's not going to carry the same power here at featherweight. So to win, Max is going to have to avoid damage. He's going to have to use the jab, maintain some distance, and that's going to be difficult with Ilia's footwork. We also need to be reminded that there's been discussions that we're going to go to the center of the ring and be a BMF and do the thing at the beginning of the fight. Now that, again, is going to play into Ilia's hands, in my opinion. I think that we know Topuria is a stronger fighter. We know he's got more power. So why would you want to stand in the pocket and trade with somebody with better power? If you want to box, if you think you have better boxing than Topuria, then showcase it with your jab. And that's how he's going to have to win. He's also going to have to show at some point he can take a punch from Topuria. And that doesn't seem like it's going to be a winning strategy. Unfortunately, I think Max has set himself up here with a bad matchup. I would have loved to seen him at lightweight. And I think he would have had much more success there. And he maybe still has that opportunity should the outcome be a knockout by Topuria here or a win by Topuria. If it's a close fight, they're probably going to rematch at some point. But I don't really see that happening. I think Max may have also taken the fight against Topuria because the featherweight division is generally weaker than lightweight. But I think Max fits in better at lightweight because his skills and his power translate better there. Anyways, if Max can weather the storm, start to wear down Ilia, he'll have a shot in the later rounds to win by a decision. But we know Ilia has many more options to win this one. He's good on the ground, he's good in his stand-up, and that means he's got more ways to win. That's why he's a heavy favorite here. The money line is minus 245 for Topuria versus plus 200 on Max. If you had a bet on Max in that fight against Justin Gaethje, you would have made some good money. What a fight it was, as I said. I love watching Max Holloway fight. He's such an entertainer. He's a fighter through and through, a great guy, and I wish that I didn't have to pick against Max here. But we're going to see Max get knocked out for the first time in his UFC career, and that's saying a lot because if people that he's fought have been top tier, we've got plus 170 Topuria to win by KO, TKO, or DQ. I have a hard time seeing a submission taking place. You could go with an inside the distance bet, but I don't see Topuria taking this one to the ground. He could, but I don't see it happen. I think he's just going to put the lights out on Max Holloway. So we're going to go plus 170. Ilia Topuria wins the main event, retains his belt by knockout. Thank you so much for tuning into the video. Hit that like button, guys. Really appreciate the support. Going to grow this channel into something special, and it's starting here. Leave a comment down below. Let me know if you disagree with any of the picks that I've put together. Let me know if there's anything else you want me to touch on in the next video. Make sure you subscribe so that you don't miss anything going forward. Enjoy the fights, and have a great day.